Hello, I'm the Miami Autism Dad, Victor Antunes, the Inclusive Miami Realtor, and this is the Autism Podcast at Miami's Community Newspapers. Today, I'm with Aida Díaz-Silveira. She's the supervising attorney of the Neurodivergent Legal Assistance Program at CABA. Aida, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me here today.
And thank you for being here. This is a super important topic we're going to cover today. So we're going to cover working with neurodivergent families, immigrant children, foster youth, tenants facing eviction, and survivors of human trafficking. At least we're going to try. It's a lot of subjects. Each one of them could be a 30-minute show, but we'll try and do a little bit of each one. We'll see how it goes. So tell me a little bit about the history of CABA.
So CABA started in the 1980s by a group of Cuban-American attorneys that identified a need in the community to help those most vulnerable with access to the legal system.
Now, you have chosen to be in pro bono work versus the private sector. Why did you make that decision?
So I made that decision based on a personal experience where I was at a vulnerable state and I did not receive the support from the attorney that I needed. And that made me realize that if something like that could happen to an attorney, then there's people in society, in our community, that need my help in order to right that wrong.
Yeah, I got to say, as a lay person, I'm blessed that I have a brother who's an attorney. So if I have any questions, I can go to him. But I'm going to just guess that most people don't have a brother attorney. And then if you're of low financial means, you can't just call an attorney for everything. So a lot of stuff, you're just going to end up either not asking. Maybe that's going to cause you some problems, or you ask the wrong attorney and they give you bad advice, expensive advice, and it goes wrong for you. So, I'm sorry for that. And we can't all have that, but it's great that you're doing the pro bono work. It's super, super needed. Now let's start with the Neurodivergent Legal Assistance Program. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Okay. Well, I'm very excited to have this platform to spread the word on our services. Mm-hmm. We have a program here at CABA, the Neurodivergent Legal Assistance Program. We offer free legal services to young adults with intellectual and developmental disabilities and their families. Mm-hmm. And the specific goal of the program is to preserve fundamental rights for the neurodivergent adults as they transition to adulthood while preserving access and support that's needed for healthcare and education.
Yeah, and I'll tell you what's great about having these conversations is that I feel that even though you've been around for decades, most people have never heard of you. And there's a lot of other big programs out there, like there's the Center for Autism-Related Disabilities, Parent to Parent, that I'll mention these to autism parents, and they're like, I never heard of that. Mm-hmm. And there's these great free resources that are out there, but if you don't know that they exist, they might as well not exist. So it's really important to have these conversations. Now, can you tell me if maybe there was a moment where you found, where you helped a family that was at legal risk, that if they hadn't come to you, things could have gone really sideways for them?
Well, I feel that everyone of our clients is better off for being with our organization. We not only provide legal representation, we have full wraparound service where needed. Mm-hmm. We assist sometimes an individual with applying to college or a driver's license. Actually, we just had the DMV provide a mobile van service for driver's license at one of our offices over several months. The last one was last Friday. Mm-hmm. And I think everybody that walks through our door is someone whose life is going to be empowered, and the quality of life will improve based on their contact with our organization. And our motto is changing lives through legal advocacy. And I have seen that firsthand with every single case that everyone who walks through our door.
Yeah, I got to tell you that I go to your website and it wouldn't be obvious that you would help people out with driver's licenses, and yet you're there. So when people plug into you, I mean, how do they know that all these services are available to them?
Well, we have social media accounts where we're spreading the word. Mm-hmm. We've grown tremendously in the last 3 years since I've been there. When I first started, I was maybe the 8th employee, and we're almost at 30. We have 13 attorneys now. So that's why we're so fortunate to have this opportunity today to spread the word on all of our programs, because I feel like for many years it's been word of mouth within certain communities. And now we have more funding support from the county and from Funding Florida Legal Aid, which is the legal aid foundation arm of the Florida Bar. And I think it's all about each case. So as attorneys, we focus on giving the best representation to one person at a time, and just doing the work makes it all grow, whether it's through word of mouth or whether the community finds out about it through agencies or even through lawmakers. And we've just been very fortunate to have grown in our reputation, especially over the last 12 years under the leadership of Leslie Mendoza, who's our executive director. And she has really brought our services to the forefront of the community.
Now, there's been a budget deficit here in Dade County especially. Has that affected you guys at all?
I can't speak so much to the budget side, but I do think that it feels that over the last few years, it has felt like there's a challenge in that area. We did go before the commission last month, and there was a motion made by Senator Rene Garcia. He's the commissioner for District 13 in Miami-Dade County, and it was supported by the rest of the commission and the mayor, and we're very grateful for that because we did need more funding, and we do need more funding to provide more services. So yes, I do think it's been a challenge, but I feel positive that that will all change in the future, especially with us getting the word out in the community about what we're doing.
Okay. Now, one of the things that you guys talk about on the website is with these neurodivergent kids and their legal rights. You guys go for least restrictive. Please explain that.
Okay. So Florida statute provides for two different ways to obtain a guardianship. One way, which is the most talked about way that's traditionally been used in Miami-Dade County, has been first filing for an incapacity determination, where an individual is placed before a committee to be evaluated by a panel of 3 individuals in the mental health field, one of them being a physician. There is another form of guardianship where you can arrive to the same place and protect your loved one, but you use existing medical reports, evaluations, based on a diagnosis that the individual has before attaining the age of 18. So we feel strongly that with the increased diagnosis of developmental and intellectual disabilities in our community, that these young individuals are still developing, and many times they're experiencing delays, and that it is not necessary to remove all of their fundamental rights when they turn 18.
You know, speaking of delays, my daughter, she was born neurotypical. And around 2.5, she didn't just have a delay, she had a regression. And, she's getting better. She's only 8 years old. So it's hard for me to look out into the future and know where she's going to be at. But my wife and I have discussed it already, not at length because she's only 8. We got a long way to go, but we're definitely going to try and go the least restrictive amount. And I have a lot of these conversations. But we were talking before the podcast, and you start talking like legal jargon, and I start to get lost because I'm just a regular dad. So when people show up to these families, how do you explain the full spectrum of legal rights for themselves and for their kids?
Well, it happens over a course of conversation. So many times after someone telephones our office, their first point of contact will be an intake team or a professional who will speak to them about the services, and they will have a brief questionnaire on whether they meet our eligibility requirements, because you must be low income and immigrant eligible to receive our services. And then once they're passed over to me, I will spend sometimes an hour to 2 hours just on a phone call explaining our program to make sure it's the right fit. And then after that, we schedule an appointment where they come in. And sometimes they may come in for several appointments before they decide which is the right course of action. So I tell them about the statute, about the law, about the different options. And then many times they go back home, they speak about it with their family, sometimes with the physicians and with their child themselves before they decide what's the right fit for them and their family.
Now, you said immigrant eligible. My parents are immigrants. I was born here. Unpack the eligibility part.
So this is an evolving sort of definition based on the last few months. But yes, so our funders, there's requirements for who we assist, and individuals must be in the immigration system. So it has to be somebody that the government knows is here.
Okay. Now, going back to the guardianship, how do you decide if this young adult needs a court-appointed guardian, advocate, or if supported decision-making is the way for them to go?
Well, a lot of it will be so first I speak with the parents, and based on that conversation and that meeting, if it seems to me that their son or daughter is, let's say, high functioning and could understand a document such as a supported decision-making agreement or a power of attorney, then I may suggest, if they wish, to go the least restrictive route is, let's go ahead and meet with your child. And based on that meeting, I will determine if there's legal capacity to understand executing a power of attorney or sometimes a supported decision-making agreement. It really is something that depends on each case. I will say if there's a security or safety issue, I would never recommend going power of attorney or supported decision-making agreement, because if somebody needs healthcare or they have a condition, many times there's someone just doesn't have one diagnosis. They may also have another health condition that needs medical care, and it could be sometimes emergency care. So if a family is afraid of showing up at an emergency room needing life-threatening care, then that person would most likely, if the individual needed support, would need a type of a guardianship to ensure that they have smooth medical attention at the right moment.
You know, I've had conversations before where people, they're saying that right now you can get medical care and not worry about immigration status, but that could change. Where do you think that we are, like, honestly, in that situation?
I don't know.
I don't know the best answer.
Right. Who's making that decision, if it's at the state level. I wish I could ease everybody's concerns. I would like to think that if somebody had an emergency, that they would receive the medical attention regardless of their status.
Yeah, you would hope. Now, I'm going to assume that if you're in the immigration process, you're processing a lot of information. Then on top of that, you've got a neurodivergent kid. How do you help parents get through this whole, because, you know, you got the immigration's one thing, then possibly guardianship or support decision-making. How do you guide them through that process? There must be a lot of overlap.
There is. So many times throughout our representation of a client, we find out towards the end that, oh, we're ready. You know, my son or daughter is ready to submit, let's say, their citizenship application. So certainly we guide them through that portion of that, even though they didn't come to me for immigration. As I mentioned, we like to give wraparound services. So because of my background that I had practiced in the private sector for so long in immigration, I'm able to help that family with that case. So yes, there's ways in our immigration system to support someone with a disability applying for citizenship.
No, I've had other attorneys that do a guardianship and support decision making, and they say that they should come to the attorney when the kid's 17 and a half. Is this also like what you're recommending?
Yes. So I think the goal is for all players in the community and the political system is to address these issues at the same time. So in the public school system, between the ages of 16 and 18, I believe maybe even earlier, the family is informed that they will need a transition plan. So ideally, that would be the best time. So it's never too early. We've spoken to families with very young children, and that's what we're here for. We're here to educate everyone on the system. And it is evolving. I do want to point out that so much has changed just in the last, I would say, 9 months. I've been working with the local probate division under the chief probate judge, Yvonne Kolodny, who is supporting our program. And she's encouraged us to continue with this program as much as possible. And I will say it's a very good time right now for families to go the least restrictive route. I think that the judiciary is catching up with what's happening in the community in terms of inclusivity and integration. And I would like to see a change in the way everybody accepts individuals that are neurodivergent into the community.
You know, when it comes to the legal system, I don't think that we're there yet, and we never will be there. But I think that there is a good faith effort to get us there. Is that what you're finding also?
Yes, I am. I believe that, especially with the judiciary, after so many decades and decades of imagine what they see in the cases that require an incapacity. When we're talking about children that are still developing, I think it's very, very harsh. And especially, I would imagine, as a judge, I'm not a judge, but for an attorney, we go to law school to defend those most vulnerable and to fight for rights. And our country's based on that, on protecting rights. So I'm very, very happy to see that these cases are viewed upon favorably and that we're able to preserve rights for individuals that are neurodivergent.
That's great. You know, and speaking of the immigrant kids, There's the special immigrant juvenile visa. Never heard of that. Can you tell me what that's all about?
Okay. So we have a program, and it has actually been our signature program. We've helped over 1,000 children in this program over the last 12 years. Again, under the stewardship of Leslie Mendoza. She's our director. And these children, this would be a child who's here without one or both parents that's been abused, abandoned, or neglected, and requires an adult in the state to take custody. And they need this so that someone can make decisions for them, for healthcare and for education and for living. So we represent these future guardians. So it's not guardianship. This is something else. This is actually in another court. And we present the case. And if it is found that this individual's life would be threatened if they were to be returned to their home country because there's no one there to take care of them, and the state court issues a custody, we take that state custody order to the federal system, to the immigration system, and we establish to the federal system that the state is protecting this child, and therefore the federal government should protect this child. And that would result in what's called the special immigrant juvenile system, which is an immigrant category that leads to a green card.
Good for them. Now, you mentioned these foster kids with one or no parents, the ones with no parents. Who are these guardians that are appointed to take care of them?
It could be an uncle. Sometimes it could be an older sibling. We've seen some very sad cases, for instance, coming out of Haiti. Many times it could be a family friend. It could even be maybe a soccer coach.
And what if there's no one, though? That's what I'm thinking.
Oh, then they would go into the custody of the Department of Children and Families. Right. That would be a dependency. We handle those as well.
I was talking to a lady who works with a foster parent service, and I didn't know this because I'm always educating myself, but there's no such thing as orphanages anymore. Is this correct?
I believe this is correct. You would go under the care of the Department of Children and Families, and they would be, placed through the foster care system and such. Yes. Yeah,
that's a tough place to be for these kids. So with the foster kids, there's guardians ad litem and attorneys ad litem, if I got that correct?
Correct.
Tell me about that, please.
Okay. So guardian ad litems is traditionally what we've all heard about when, let's say, there's a divorce case and the court appoints an objective third party to come in to interview both parties, mom and dad, and the children, and to give a report to the court and advice on what they think is best for time sharing and for custody and schooling issues and things like that. Attorney ad litem is different. Attorney ad litem is where there's where there's a child who's in the dependency system, and then you have the Department of Children and Families is there. You have also the guardian ad litem who's sitting in a separate area altogether, and the child is alone on the other side of the courtroom. And the other parties are giving their opinion on what's best for that child. But sometimes the child has their own wishes on what they think is best for them, but they don't really have a voice. So the attorney ad litem is where the court allows an attorney to represent the child so that the child's wishes could be expressed. And it could be as simple as, I need a pair of shoes, or I need an item of clothing, or I'm not feeling well. And sometimes the system doesn't account for what they're feeling.
Now, I'm guessing that with these kids' wants and desires, they're going to increase as they get older. Yes? The say they have in what's done with them?
As they get older, but they're not 18 yet?
Right, still in the system, but I'm assuming that a 10-year-old versus a 15-year-old, you're going to have different wants and desires, and you have different emotional ability to present these to the adults around you. And am I correct in thinking this?
I think it depends on the case. You'd be surprised. I think some young children can really express themselves and what they want. But yes, in terms of the attorney ad litem, definitely it gives the child a voice. There's a lot of adults in these cases that are, there's caseworkers, and there's something called a staffing with many different parties involved talking about what's best for the child in terms of schooling and therapies. And I do believe that that they should have a voice, even if it is for something small because they're little and maybe it doesn't seem so significant to an adult, but
at that age,
it's about empowering the child. Yes.
Everybody wants agency.
Yes.
Now, you mentioned dependency system. What is that?
So dependency is when there's a child in foster care that's dependent on the state. So it goes into a different court division.
Okay. Now, on the website, it says that when kids go through your program, you're experiencing lower runaway rates and fewer kids entering the juvenile system. Can you tell me about that?
Well, I wish I could tell you more. It's not the area I practice in at work, but I will say from my experience of what I've witnessed myself is the attorneys that are working with those cases spend a lot of time with those children. They visit them for their birthdays. We have gift drives to benefit the children. They support them with, what they want to do in the future, make career choices, many times help them apply to colleges. So I do believe that's what sets us apart at CABA Pro Bono is our bedside manner. And I believe that we empower through compassion, and that's the success rates that you see there.
I was going to, you answered my question. I was going to ask you, why are you having better success rates? And you just said it's just spending time with these kids, which is a shame because there's always going to be, I think, more need than availability. So let's go now to tenants facing eviction. Now, these clients of yours who are facing eviction, these are also immigrant families?
Well, that program is a collaboration with Miami-Dade County.
Okay.
And we work under Legal Services of Greater Miami. And the cases are intake there, and then they send us whoever is overflow for them, right? So many of the cases that they do send us are, in fact, for immigrants, based on different requirements that, we're able to help, I think, in that area a little bit more. And yes, there's a lot of immigrants that are in this country that are facing eviction.
Now, why is the county involved?
Okay, that's interesting. So after COVID, there was an eviction moratorium for a few years. And these tenants had a hard time with the increased rent because then when that was over, landlords increased their rent. So Mayor Daniela Levine Cava led a tenants' rights change to local ordinance. So they were giving tenants more rights so that they couldn't be evicted so suddenly. And they were putting more restrictions on the landlords. And that's the momentum for that program. And in our first year of funding for that program, the state preempted the local ordinance. But thankfully, the county has continued the program, and it's continued on now. I think we're going into maybe our third year. It started in 2023.
Now, with these people that are facing eviction, do you see any common patterns that maybe we can address, like specific, like 1, 2, 3 big things that would make like the biggest changes?
I think sometimes the tenants are scared to speak to their landlords. I think communication is key. I think, the law is in the favor of the landlord. So the tenants don't have that much power if they can't pay the rent. I think that a lot could be resolved through communication and figuring out a way for it to go well. I don't think these landlords really want to throw everybody out. I think sometimes it's, the tenants are scared and, maybe they're not telling the landlord what's going on. It could be a temporary hardship. I'm sure the landlords most of the time would do a payment plan. And in my experience, that's what I've seen has been the most effective so that there's no eviction judgment. We do try to help the tenants to have a clean record. And we try to have some sort of a settlement to work those cases out.
Now, with families that have autistic or disabled kids, it gets even more complicated because it's more expensive. And, it's not just like you're losing a roof. Maybe you're losing benefits and therapies. How does that play out?
So those cases are very hard. Many families, when their child turns 18, don't know what the law is. And it's very harsh. And so, yes, we see many families that they need help understanding what are the options. Many are told that they need to do a full plenary guardianship, and that's not necessarily true. Each case is different, and they're always very pleased to hear that they have options because they didn't know they had options. Yeah.
I was at a presentation, and the attorney presenting, she was talking about different guardianship packages that she had. And the most expensive one was $10,000, which for a lot of people it's just impossible. You might as well say, let's go, move to the moon because just the money's not there. So your services are completely free. And the funding, do you ever find yourself turning people away? And if you do, where do they go? Or do you not turn people away?
Thankfully, we haven't turned anybody away because they qualify. So if you qualify, we won't turn you away. Sometimes there's families that need a more restrictive guardianship. These are typically more in the nonverbal side. But I do have a wonderful success story of a family that I worked with over 6 months before even deciding what we were going to do.
Mm-hmm.
And their child, who is nonverbal, had started using letterboard to communicate at the age of 17.
Mm.
They had just begun learning that she had preferences in music and different things. And she even began to tell her family through the letterboard she didn't like it when they played this music so loud, or they liked this genre better. And I thought that was a beautiful story. And so that's why it's important to take our time in analyzing a case, because if we would have impulsively done another route early on, they might have ended up maybe with a plenary. But because of this breakthrough, and she was almost 18 when she had this breakthrough, we were able to present all this evidence to the court, and she was able to obtain the least restrictive guardianship and preserving her fundamental rights.
Now, kids change. Until 25 years old, your brain's still developing. And I'm thinking with neurodivergent kids, it's maybe even longer than that. So if parents, let's say they get full-on guardianship, they can change it if the kid improves, yes?
Correct.
Okay. Now, speaking of not turning people away, when I had my daughter evaluated, she was evaluated at Fiddlers. We go there, they were very nice, awesome Fiddlers in South Miami. But we had to wait 2 or 3 months, which wasn't that long. Mm-hmm. But if somebody's facing eviction, that could be the 2 or 3 months where where now they find themselves in the street. So with people that are, I'm sure you've got a line, right? Because if I show up a year ago, I think that I should be front of the line. But if you have people coming to you in crisis, how do you handle that?
Well, the evictions case is an emergency crisis. So when someone's facing eviction, if the landlord has filed a complaint, they have 5 days to answer the complaint. So yes, we do tend to those cases right away. Those are emergency cases.
Yeah, the thing about these emergency cases, for the lay person, that 5 days is they I'm sure it doesn't register a lot of people. I mean, are you finding that?
That they don't know their rights?
Yeah, or you tell them, but they're from a different country. Maybe they don't speak Spanish or Creole, and they don't really understand what they're getting.
Well, I believe after speaking with us, they do understand. Okay. And I do think they're worried. I think they're desperate. I don't think they want to let the 5 days pass. They're eager when they find out that they have a right to answer a lawsuit, even if it won't win. Mm-hmm. They want to put their reasons there, and they want a voice, and we're giving them that voice in the justice system. And
you help them with all that paperwork?
Yes.
Okay. Is mediation also a thing with evictions?
Not that I'm aware of.
No. And are there any rental assistance programs? Because you set people up on a payment program, but some people might not have it. Are there rental assistance programs?
There are. So, it depends on the funding. Sometimes the county has rental assistance. Victims of domestic violence and human trafficking, mm-hmm. I know the county also offers assistance. Sometimes the assistance runs out, but we know where to send everybody. And there's different shelters as well. There's the homeless trust. If there's an egregious case, the county won't allow someone to be on the street if they can help it. I mean, I think we've only had one case out of maybe 400 or 500 where someone was actually removed from their home.
That is really good to hear. Mm-hmm. I'm so glad the county's stepping up that way. Mm-hmm. Now, have you seen any cases where people came to you quickly? And because one of the things that I want to instill in people is that time is of the essence. Mm-hmm. No matter if it's having your kid evaluated and diagnosed, what have you, or rental assistance. Tell me a success story where a parent knew that time was of the essence. They came to you and you had a good ending, and maybe we can encourage people to do the same thing.
Yes. I had a case with a boy that suffered a condition that was life-threatening. And the family had just been to our office for services, and they had the right paperwork in place, and it was like a godsend. I think he turned 18 on a Tuesday. We had the documentation in place by Thursday. We didn't know there would be an emergency the next week, but everything was seamless because when they arrived to the hospital, they had all the paperwork they needed.
Okay. So I got the 2-minute warning, but we're going to keep going because this is a really good conversation. What I want to talk about with you is survivors of human trafficking. Now, this is something that I have learned lately, that human trafficking in South Florida is a big problem.
Mm-hmm. Yes. So like you, I've learned that the human trafficking is mainly domestic. So many times it's children that are in the foster care system, mm-hmm. that are unstable, in their home environment and many times might run away, let's say, and then they get wrapped up in a group, and that's where the human trafficking takes place.
Now, is it, and I'm just thinking of like the language barriers and such, or not knowing the system, is it worse amongst immigrant populations?
Absolutely, especially when they're scared about their status, and actually, the human. This is very interesting that you bring this up, and I'm going to tie this into human trafficking. Federal courts have interpreted trafficking to include any kind of a relationship where one party exerts coercion or control over another party. So it doesn't mean that you're bringing somebody in you're not smuggling in a human across the border. It's actually where one party exerts control over another, and the other party thinks they have no free will to not do something. So that can happen in a lot of different contexts. So in the immigration context, we've seen sort of all of our areas tie in, our practice areas. You might have an immigrant tenant who's being coerced by landlords saying, if you don't pay me, I'm going to report you to the immigration authorities. So technically, under a federal court interpretation, that's trafficking. The person doesn't feel that they have any free will. I mean, this is enforced labor areas too. But yes, definitely the immigrant population is a vulnerable population.
And I'm sure it's worse amongst kids.
Yes, kids are very vulnerable.
And let's talk about the county level. At the county level, what is being done to prevent this?
With the trafficking,
yes.
Well, our state attorney, Catherine Fernandez-Rondo, is a leader in this field. The cases that we assist, we work in conjunction with the state attorney with the human trafficking. And I think there's support from all the community and the lawmakers on this front. The commission has, all the different commissioners seem to have, different areas they focus on, but together the county commission also, and they do support us with some community funding to address these issues as well.
You just educated me, because when you talk about human trafficking, I always just assume somebody's being brought in from overseas, but it can be domestic. Now, is the human trafficking problem getting better, getting worse? Is it getting worse on paper because we're expanding the definition of it? How does that play out?
It's not my area. There's another attorney who leads that effort. The part I know is because our headquarters is in a building that offers services for human trafficking. It's a county building. And so I see, the individuals that go there for help. I don't know that this is something that's new or that's ever going to go away.
No.
Especially not when you're talking about vulnerable populations.
Yeah, I mean, crime's never going to go away.
Right.
We can get better at tramping them down, but it's never going to go away. It's just not how it is. So I've got 5 last questions I want to ask you to wrap this up. First question is, looking back, what's changed the most, you, the system, or the families?
Well, I would like to thank the families. I because of our motto, changing lives through legal advocacy, the families, that's the change that we're aiming for, is to make an impact on an individual level. We don't set out to make change on a broader level in the community, but I do think it changes one person at a time. And I would like to point out that I do feel within my practice area right now, the Neurodivergent Assistance Program, that the judiciary is definitely making changes to be more inclusive of the special needs community.
Yeah, I see that, and I think that it's a good faith effort. Yes. So second question is, what would you say to a young attorney considering pro bono work?
I think they should absolutely do it. I can say, after practicing in the private arena for 25 years, that this is more fulfilling, more rewarding, and you have instant gratification, and you see your impact right away.
You sure do. Their question is, if you could write one line into Florida's law, what would it say?
Just because someone has a diagnosis of a developmental disability does not mean they can't vote.
That's a good one. Fourth question, what would surprise people most about who actually walks through your door?
You wouldn't believe the accomplished, educated individuals that we see that have been humbled through life circumstances that are now asking for help.
Yeah, I can see that being very much the case. Last question, how do you know when a case is truly closed? What justice feels real?
I think for me personally, it would be the feedback I obtained from the families and the smiles on their faces and the relief that they're not scared anymore.
Yeah, I think that the fear of the unknown, especially with the immigrants and all that's going on, that's going to be totally the case. Well, let's turn to the camera and we'll sign off here. This has been the Autism Podcast with Aida from CABA. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you again next time.